So how did the church address, and how did Western Europe address this growing Ottoman Turkish threat in the latter part of the 16th century? Well, it's through the efforts of Pope St. Pius V, whom we talked about with his reform decrees from the Council of Trent, or the implementing of the reform decrees from the Council of Trent. Pope St. Pius V saw this Turkish threat growing, and so he formed the Holy League. And the Holy League was an alliance between the Papal States, Venice, and the Kingdom of Spain. And so this Holy League was going to construct and build a fleet to go and attack the Turkish fleet that was bent on the conquest of Rome. Pius V put at the head of this fleet Don Juan of Austria. Don Juan of Austria was a 24-year-old illegitimate son of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. So he was half-brother to Philip II, King of Spain. He was a very young man, but an able military commander, as we'll see when we talk about the battle. The Turks presented a very great fleet, a numerous fleet. They were in the confines of the Gulf of Lepanto, and they had 300 war galleys in their fleet with over 100,000 men and some fierce soldiers known as janissaries as well in this fleet. So they were bent on the conquest of Rome. Also in this Turkish fleet were 14,000 Christian galley slaves. So the way to picture warfare, naval warfare at this time, is if you've seen the movie Ben-Hur, and you know Ben-Hur is shackled in the bottom of a Roman ship and he's rowing, and they have that infamous scene in the battle where they engage. Basically, that's what naval warfare was still like here in the 16th century. You had these wooden ships with a main mast that had a sail to it, so if you had the wind in your favor, you could use your sail to power the ship, and then you could let all of the galley slaves below deck come up on top of deck, and then they could fight once you got alongside an enemy ship. Because the whole idea for these galleys was to come along each other, and then they would throw grappling hooks to the other ship, lash the ships together, and then the men on deck would flow over to the enemy ship and try to capture the enemy ship. So the Turks had these 14,000 Christian galley slaves down below decks rowing the ships into battle. If you have the wind in your favor, then you can release those galley slaves up on deck. If you don't have the wind in your favor, then you have to keep them below deck to row to propel your ship. So that's important because it all comes into play what happens here at the Battle of Lepanto. The Christian fleet was less numerous than the Turkish fleet, only 200 war galleys. Interestingly, though, every man, both slave and free in the Christian fleet, was given a rosary before the fleet sailed. A papal representative was also near the fleet at her port when she sailed and blessed the fleet as she left to engage in this battle. Chaplains also were present throughout the fleet. Dominicans, Franciscans, and Jesuits were scattered throughout the fleet in order to encourage and bless the men and hear their confessions before they went into battle. One important and interesting character who participated in the Battle of Lepanto becomes famous later for a work that he wrote known as Don Quixote. So Miguel Cervantes actually participated in the Battle of Lepanto, fought very bravely, and was even wounded during it. The two fleets met in the Gulf of Lepanto on Sunday, October 7th, 1571. The Turkish fleet was aligned in the form of a crescent. This was how they actually always fought their battles in order to envelop and inflank the opposing enemy fleet. Don Juan of Austria decided that he would arrange his ships in the form of a cross. And so literally, at the Battle of Lepanto, you had the cross and the crescent fighting one another. And the reason why Don Juan had put his ships in the form of a cross was because he had some secret weapons. He had a secret weapon that he had developed. What he did with some of his galleys is he outfitted his galleys with side-mounted cannon instead of forward-mounted cannon. Most galleys at this time only had cannons in the bow, not on the side. So he took a few of his galleys, had these side-mounted cannons, and put them on the transept of the actual cross. So that they were lined up this way. As the Turkish ships came at them, they could fire this broadside shot against the Turkish fleet and decimate them. He also put musketeers on top of the deck in order to fire volleys into the Turkish ships when they got close. So he really actually changed the tactics of naval warfare with this Battle of Lepanto. He also had at his disposal another secret weapon. It was a spiritual weapon. And this spiritual weapon was an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, was present on the ships. The Bishop of Mexico at the time had produced a small reproduction of the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, touched it to the original, and then sent it to King Philip II of Spain with instructions to make sure it was present in the fleet. King Philip of Spain gave this image to Admiral Doria, who was in the midst of the battle. He had the image on his ship, and the wind changed during an important moment in the battle. Remember how I said that if you had the wind against you, which the Christian fleet did at the time in the battle at this moment, you had to have all of your galley slaves or rowers down below decks rowing to propel the ship. But if the wind changed and now you have the wind in your favor and you have the sail, you can release them all up to deck to fight. And that's exactly what happened here present at this moment in the battle when Admiral Doria's flagship, with the image of Our Lady Guadalupe on it, the wind changed, he was able to release his sailors from below decks, fight the Turks, and win an overwhelming victory. The Christian fleet, although outnumbered, won a great victory that day on Sunday, October 7th, 1571. They captured and destroyed over 200 Turkish war galleys. The Turks suffered 30,000 casualties, and 12,000 of those 14,000 Christian galley slaves were freed. The Christians lost a total of only 12 galleys. It was an amazing, almost miraculous victory that day towards the end of the 16th century. As a result, during the battle, towards the end of the battle, after the battle had been won, St. Pius V back in Rome, had no news of the battle, but he was meeting with his treasurer. All of a sudden, he got up, walked to the window, and said this: "This is not a moment for business. Make haste to thank God, because our fleet this moment has won a victory over the Turks." So he had a miraculous knowledge that the battle had been won. And so he called for a great celebration to take place, and the news eventually reached Rome later that the Christian fleet had won this victory. A year after the victory, in 1572, he ordered an annual commemoration of the event under the title of Our Lady of Victory. And then a year after that, Gregory XIII, the new pope, changed the name of that feast day from Our Lady of Victory to Our Lady of the Rosary, giving credit to Our Lady and the Rosary for giving the Christians this great victory over Islam. And it's a feast day that we still celebrate in the church today. Every October 7th is the feast of Our Lady of the Most Holy Rosary, and it commemorates this great battle in the 16th century.